think I'm live. Let's go on my duty, man. Chapter 11. Meanwhile, the dinner, in its earliest stages, was dragging its slow length along through the sterling form. The room was chilly, in spite of the calendar, and Aunt Alberta had the gas logs lighted. Everybody in the clan envied her those gas logs, except Wallace. Glorious open fires blazed in every room of her blue castle when autumnal nights were cool. But she would have frozen to death in it before she would have committed the scarlet of a gas log. Uncle Harbert made his hardly perennial joke when he helped Aunt Wellington to the cold meat. Mary, will you have a little lamb? Aunt Mildred told the same old story of once finding a lost ring in Turkey's croak. Uncle Benjamin told his favorite prosy told his favorite prosy tale of how he had once chased and punished a now famous man for stealing apples. Second cousin Jane described all her sufferings with an ulcerating tooth. Aunt Wellington admired the pattern of Aunt Alberta's silver teaspoons and lamented the fact that one of her own had been lost. It spoiled the set. I could never get it matched, and it was my wedding present from dear old Aunt Matilda. Aunt Isabel thought the seasons were changing and couldn't imagine what had become of our good, old fashioned springs. Cousin Georgiana, as usual, discussed the last funeral and wondered audibly which of us will be the next to pass away. Cousin Georgiana could never say anything as well as die. Well, as he thought she could tell her, but didn't. Cousin Gladys, likewise as usual, had a grievance. Her visiting nephews had nipped all the buds off her houseplants and chewed her brood of fancy chickens. Squeezed some of them actually to death, my dear. Boys will be boys, reminded Uncle Harbert tolerantly, but they needn't be rampageous animals, retorted Cousin Gladys, looking around the table for appreciation of her wit. Everybody smiled except Valency. Cousin Gladys remembered that. A few minutes later, when Ellen Hamilton was being discussed, Cousin Gladys spoke of her as one of those shy, plain girls who can't get husbands, and glanced significantly at Valency. Uncle James thought the conversation was sagging to a rather low plane of personal gossip. He tried to elevate it by starting an abstract discussion on the greatest happiness. Fuck it. Everybody was asked to state his or her idea of the greatest happiness. Aunt Mildred thought the greatest happiness for a woman was to be a loving and beloved wife and mother. Aunt Wellington thought it would be to travel in Europe. Olive thought it would be to a great singer like Tetrazzini. Cousin Gladys remarked mournfully that her greatest happiness would be to be free, absolutely free from Neurides. Cousin Georgiana. Cousin Georgiana's greatest happiness would be to have her dear dead brother Richard back. Aunt Alberta remarked vaguely that the greatest happiness was to be found in the poetry of life, and hastily gave some directions to her maid to prevent anyone asking her what she meant. Mrs. Frederick said the greatest happiness was to spend your life in loving service for others. And cousin Stickles and Aunt Isabel agreed with her. Aunt Isabel with a resentful air, as if she thought Mrs. Frederick had taken the wind out of her sails by saying it first. We are all too prone, continued Mrs. Frederick. Wow, a cow and went. The other women all felt rebuked for their low ideals, and Uncle James had a conviction that the conversation had been uplifted with a vengeance. The greatest happiness, said Wellesley, suddenly and distinctly, is to sneeze when you want to. Everybody stared. Nobody felt it safe to say anything. Was Wellesley trying to be funny? It was incredible. Mrs. Frederick, who had been breathing easier since the dinner had progressed so far without any outbreak on the part of Wellesley, began to tremble again. But she deemed it the part of prudence to say nothing. Uncle Benjamin was not so prudent. He rashly rushed in where Mrs. Frederick feared to tread. Yes, he chuckled. What is the difference between a young girl and an old maid? One is happy and careless, and other is happy and hairless, said Valence. You have asked that riddle at least 50 times in my recollection, Uncle Bear. Why don't you hunt up some new riddles? A riddle you must. It is such a fatal mistake to try to be funny if you don't succeed. Uncle Benjamin stared foolishly. Never in his life had he, Benjamin Sterling, of Sterling and Frost, been spoken to so. And by Wallace, of all people, he looked feebly around the table to see what the others thought about it. Everybody was looking rather blank. Poor Mrs. Frederick had shut her eyes, and her lips moved tremblingly, as if she were praying. Perhaps she was. The situation was so unprecedented that nobody knew how to meet it. Valency went on calmly eating her salad as if nothing out of the usual had occurred. Wait 20 minutes here. A cow. Aunt Alberta, to save her dinner, plunged into an account of how a dog had bitten her recently. Uncle James, to back her up, let me store an idea. I just got it. Yeah, just Uncle James, to back her up, asked where the dog had bitten. Just a little below the Catholic Church, said Aunt Alberta. At that point, Valency laughed. Nobody else laughed. What was there to laugh at? What was there to laugh at? Is that a vital part? Vital part? Asked Valency. asked Valency. What do you mean? Said bewildered Aunt Alberta. And Mrs. Frederick was almost driven to believe that she had served God all her years for naught. Aunt Isabel concluded that it was up to her to suppress Valency. Thus, you are horribly thin, she said. You're all corners. Do you ever try to fatten up a little? No, Valency was not asking for or given it. But I can tell you where you'll find a beauty parlor in Port Lawrence where they can reduce the number of your chins. Valency! The promise was wrong from Mrs. Frederick. She meant her tone to be stately and majestic, as usual, but it sounded more like an imploring whine. And she did not say das. She is feverish, said Cousin Stickles to Uncle Benjamin in an agonized whisper. We have thought she's seemed feverish for several days. She's gone dippy, in my opinion, growled Uncle Benjamin. If not, she ought to be spanked. Yes, spanked. You can spank her. Cousin Stickles was much agitated. She's 29 years old. So there's that advantage, at least being 29, said Willis, whose ears had caught this aside. Just, said Uncle Benjamin, when I am dead, you may say that what you please. As long as I'm alive, I demand to be treated with respect. Oh, but you know we're all dead, said Valency. The whole Sterling clan. Some of us are buried and some aren't yet. That is the only difference. Yes, said Uncle Benjamin. Thinking in my cow, Valency. Do you remember the time we stole the raspberry jam? Valency flushed scarlet with suppressed laughter, not shame. She had been sure that Uncle Benjamin would drag that jam in somehow. Of course I do, she said. It was good jam. I've always been sorry I hadn't time to eat more of it before you found me. Oh, look at Aunt Isabel's profile on the wall. Did you ever see anything so funny? Everybody looked, including Aunt Isabel herself, which of course destroyed it. But Uncle Herbert said kindly, I I wouldn't eat any more if I were you. Yes. It isn't that I grudge it, but don't you think it would be better for yourself? Your stomach seems a little out of order. Don't worry about my stomach. Oh dear, said Willis. It is all right. I'm gonna keep right on eating. It's so seldom I get the chance of a satisfying meal. It was the first time anyone had been called "Oh dear" in Deerwood. The Starlings thought Willis had invented the phrase, and they were afraid of her from that moment. There was something so uncanny about such an expression. But in poor Mrs. Frederick's opinion, the reference to a satisfying meal was the worst thing Wellesley had said yet. Wellesley had always been a disappointment to her. Now she was in disgrace. She thought she would have to get up and go away from the table. Yet she dared not leave Wellesley there. Aunt Alberta's maid came in to remove the salad plates and bring in the dessert. It was a welcome diversion. Just a quick reminder, me, the wind, the pale blue colored leaves, the lively leaves of the trees, absolutely amazing, brilliant, right? The gloomy sky with cloudy patches and this blowing wind, this silentness, the silence. Everything perfect, according to my favorite weather. Everything is awesome. Oh, Everybody brightened up with the determination to ignore Valency and talk as if she wasn't there. Uncle Wellington mentioned Barney Snaith. Eventually, somebody did mention Barney Snaith at every stalling function. Valency reflected. Whatever he was an individual that could not be ignored. She resigned herself to listen. There was a subtle fascination in this subject for her. Though she had not yet faced this fact, she could feel her pulses beating to her fingertips. Of course, they abused him. Nobody ever had a good word to say of Barney Snaith. All the old well tales were canvassed. The defaulting cashier, counterfeiter, infidel, murderer, and hiding legends were stretched out. Uncle Wellington was very indignant that such a creature should be allowed to exist at all in the neighborhood of Deerwood. He did not know what the police at Port Lawrence were thinking of. Everybody would be murdered in the Batson night. It was a shame that he should be allowed to be at large after all that he had done. What has he done? Asked Wallace suddenly. Uncle Wellington stared at her, forgetting that she was to be ignored. Done. He's done everything. What has he done? Said Peter Valence inexorably. What do you know that he has done? You're always running him down. And what has ever been proved against him? I don't argue with women, said Uncle Wellington. And I don't need proof. When a man hides himself out there on an island in Muskoka, year in and year out, and nobody can find out where he came from or how he lives or what he does there, that's proof enough. Find a mystery and you find a crime. The very idea of a man named Snaith, said second cousin Sarah. Why the name itself is enough to condemn. I wouldn't like to meet him in a dark lane, shivered cousin Georgiana. What do you suppose he would do to you? Asked Waiters. Murder me, said cousin Georgiana solemnly. Just for the fun of it, suggested Wallace. Exactly, said cousin Georgiana unsuspiciously. When there is so much smoke, there must be some fire. I was afraid he was a criminal when he came here first. I felt he said something to hide. I'm not often mistaken in my intuitions. Criminal, of course he's a criminal, said Uncle Wellington. Nobody doubts it, glaring at Wells. Why, they say he served a term in the penitentiary for embezzlement. I don't doubt it. They say he's in with the gang that are perpetrating all those bank robberies around the country. Who say? Asked Wallace. Uncle Wellington nodded his ugly forehead. What had got into his confounded girl? Anyway, he ignored the question. He has the identical look of a jailbird, snapped Uncle Benjamin. I noticed it the first time I saw him. A fellow by the hand of nature marked, quoted, and signed to do a deed of shame, declaimed Uncle James. He looked enormously pleased over managing to work that quotation in at last. He had been waiting all his life for the chance. One of his eyebrows in arc, and the other is a triangle. Sad violency. Is that why you think him so villainous? Uncle James lifted his eyebrows. Generally, when Uncle James lifted his eyebrows, the world came to an end. This time, it continued to function. How do you know his eyebrows so well, Joss? asked Olive, a trifle maliciously. Such a remark would have covered Valence with confusions 2 weeks ago, and Olive knew it. Yes, how? Demanded Uncle Wellington. Aunt Wellington, pardon me. I've seen him twice, and I looked at him closely, said Wellington composedly. I thought his face the most interesting one I ever saw. There is no doubt there's something fishy in the creature's past life, said Olive, who began to think she was decidedly out of the conversation, which had centered so amazingly around Valency. But he can hardly be guilty of everything he's accused of. Valency felt a lot. Fuck. Valency felt annoyed with Olive. Why should he speak up in even his qualified defense of one Snaith? What had she to do with him? For that matter, what had Valency? But Valency did not ask herself this question. They say he keeps dozens of cats in that hat up back on Miss Toys, said second cousin Sarah Taylor, by way of appearing not entirely ignorant of him. Cats. It sounded quite alluring to Valency. In the plural, she pictured an island in Muskoka haunted by pussies. That alone shows there is something wrong with him. The great Aunt Isabel. People who don't like cats, said Valency, attacking her desert with a relish, always seem to think that there is some peculiar virtue in not liking them. The man hasn't a friend except Roaring Abel, said Uncle Wellington. And if Roaring Abel had kept away from him, as everybody else did, it would have been better for some members of his family. Uncle Wellington's rather lame conclusion was due to a martial glance from Aunt Wellington, reminding him of what he had almost forgotten, that there were girls at the table. If you mean, said Valency passionately, that Barney Snaith is the father of Cecily Gay's child, he isn't. It's a red lie. In spite of her indignation, Phyllis was hugely amused at the expression of the faces around that festal table. She had not seen anything like that since the day 70 years ago when at Cousin Gladys' thimble party, they discovered that she had got something in her head at school. Lies in her head. Wellesley was done with euphemisms. Poor Mrs. Frederick was almost in a state of collapse. She had believed, or pretended to believe, that Valency still supposed that children were found in parsley beds. Hush, hush, implored Cousin Stickles. I don't mean to hush, said Valency perversely. I have hushed. I have hushed all my life. I'll scream if I want to. Don't make me want to. And stop talking nonsense about Barney Snaith. Barney! Wallace didn't exactly understand her own indignation. What did Barney Snaith's impurity crimes and misdemeanors matter to her? And why, out of them all, did it seem most intolerable that he should have been poor, pitiful little Cecily Gay's false lover? For it did seem intolerable to her. She did not mind when they called him a thief and a counterfeiter and jailbird. But she could not endure to think that he had loved and ruined Cecily Gay. She recalled his face on the two occasions of their chance meetings, his twisted, enigmatic, engaging smile. His twinkle, his thin, sensitive, almost ascetic lips, his general air of frank daredeviltry. A man with such a smiling lips might have murdered or stolen, but he could not have betrayed. She certainly hated everyone who said it or believed it of him. When I was a young girl, I never thought or spoke about such matters. Just said all Wellington crushingly. But I'm not a young girl, retorted Wellesley, uncrushed. Aren't you always rubbing that into me? And you're all evil minded, senseless gossips. Can't you leave poor Sissy Gay alone? She's dying. Whatever she did, God or the devil has punished her enough for it. You needn't take a hand to. As for Barney Snaith, the only crime he's been guilty of is living to himself and minding his own business. He can, it seems, get along without you, which is unpardonable in you, of course, in your little snowball. Well, as he coined that concluding word suddenly and felt that it was an inspiration. That was exactly what they were, and not one of them was fit to mend another. Well, as your poor father would turn over in his grave if he could hear you, said Mrs. Frederick. I dare say he would like that for a change, said Valency brazenly. Does, said Uncle James heavily. The Ten Commandments are fairly up to date still, especially the fifth. Have you forgotten that? No, said Valency. But I thought you had, especially the ninth. Have you ever thought, Uncle James, how dull life would be without the Ten Commandments? It is only when things are forbidden that they become fascinating. But her excitement had been too much for her. She knew by sudden unmistakable warnings that one of her attacks of pain was coming on. It must not find her there. She rose from her chair. I'm gonna go home now. I only came for the dinner. It was very good. Aunt Alberta, although your salad dressing is not salt enough, and a dash of candy would improve it. None of the flabbergasted silver wedding guests could think of anything to say until the long gate changed behind Valency in the desk. Then, she's feverish. I've said right along she's feverish. Moan Cousin Stickles. Uncle Benjamin pushed his pudgy left hand fiercely with the pudgy right. With his pudgy right. Pudgy, pudgy right. Pudgy. She's Debbie. I tell you, she's gone, Debbie. He snorted angrily. That's all there's about it. Plain Debbie. Oh, Benjamin. Benjamin. Oh, guess what? It started raining, man. A little showery raining, light rain, said Cousin Georgiana soothingly. Don't condemn her too rashly. We must remember what dear old Shakespeare says. Shakespeare says that charity thinketh no evil. Charity, poppycock, snorted Uncle Benjamin. I never heard a young woman talk such stuff in my life as she just did, talking about things she ought to be ashamed to think of, much less mention, much less mention, blaspheming, insulting us. What she wants is a generous dose of spankweed, and I like to be the one to administer it. Uncle Benjamin gulped down the half of scarlet cup of coffee. Do you suppose that the mums could work on a person that way? Wailed Cousin Stickles. I opened an umbrella in the house yesterday, sniffed Cousin Georgiana. I knew it betokened some misfortune. Have you tried to find out if she has a temperature? Asked Cousin Mildred. She wouldn't let Amelia put the thermometer under her tongue. Whimpered Cousin Stickles. Mrs. Frederick was openly in tears. All her defenses were down. I must tell you, she sobbed, that Valency had been acting very strangely over 2 weeks now. She hasn't been a bit like herself, Christian could tell you. I have hoped against hope that it was only one of her colds coming on, but it is. It must be something worse. This is bringing on my own. Fuck, patted me. This is bringing on my new tears again, said Cousin Gladys, putting her hand to her head. Don't cry, Amelia, said Hobart kindly, pulling nervously at his spiky gray hair. He hated fan interruptions, very inconsiderate of Jas to stand one at his silver wedding. Who could have supposed she had it in her? You'll have to take her to a doctor. This may be only a brainstorm. There are such things as brainstorms nowadays, aren't there? I I suggested consulting a doctor to her yesterday, more Mrs. Frederick, and she said she wouldn't go to a doctor. Wouldn't. Oh, surely I've had trouble enough. And she won't take her from spirits, said Cousin Stickles. Or anything, said Mrs. Frederick. And she's determined to go to the Presbyterian church, said Cousin Stickles, repressing, however, to her credit be it said, the story of the banister. That proves she is dipping, growled Uncle Benjamin. I noticed something strange about her the minute she came in today. I noticed it before today. Uncle Benjamin was thinking of Miraz. Everything she said today showed an unbalanced mind. That question, was it a vital part? Was there any sense at all in that remark? None whatever. There never was anything like that in the Stallings. It must be from the Vance Barris. Poor Mrs. Frederick was too crushed to be indignant. I never heard of anything like that in Vance Barris. She sobbed. Your father was odd enough, said Uncle Benjamin. Poor Pap was peculiar, admitted Mrs. Frederick cheerfully, but his mind was never affected. He talked all his life exactly as well as he did today, retorted Uncle Benjamin. And he believed he was his own great great grandfather born over again. I heard him say it. Don't tell me that a man who believed a thing like that was ever in his right senses. Come, Amelia. Stop sniffing. Of course, Dawes has made a terrible exhibition of herself today, but she is not responsible. Old maids are apt to fly off at a tangent like that. If she had been married, which she should have been, she wouldn't have got like this. Nobody wanted to marry her, said Mrs. Frederick, who felt that somehow Uncle Benjamin was blaming. Well, fortunately, there's no outsider here, snapped Uncle Benjamin. We may keep it in the family yet. I'll take her over to see Dr. Match tomorrow. I know how to deal with pig-headed people. Won't that be best, James? We must have medical advice, certainly. Agreed, Uncle James. Won't that be best, James? Well, that's settled. In the meantime, Amelia, act as if nothing had happened and keep an eye on her. Don't let her be alone. Above all, don't let her sleep alone. Renewed whimpers from Mrs. Frederick. I can't help it. Night before last, I suggested it would be better have Christine sleep with her. She positively refused and locked her door. Oh, you don't know how she's changed. She won't walk. At least she won't shoot. She won't shoot. She does her usual housework, of course. But she wouldn't sweep the parlor yesterday morning. Though we always sweep it on Thursdays, she said she'd wait till it was dirty. Would you rather sweep a dirty room rather than a clean one? I asked her. She said, of course, I'd see something for my label then. Think of it. Uncle Benjamin thought of it. The jar of potpourri, Cousin Stickles pronounced at his belt, has disappeared from her room. I found the pieces in the next lot. She won't tell us what happened to it. I should never have dreamed of it, Joss. Dreamed it of, Joss, said Uncle Herbert. She has always seemed such a quiet, sensible girl, a bit backwards but sensible. The only thing you can be sure of in this world is the multiplication table, said Mrs. Fuck, pardon me, said Uncle James, feeling cleverer than ever. Well, let's cheer up, suggested Uncle Benjamin. Why are chorus girls like fine stock raisers? Why? Uncle Chor asked Cousin Stickles. Since it had to be asked, and Valence wasn't there to ask it. Like to exhibit cost, chuckled Uncle Benjamin. Cousin Stickles thought Uncle Benjamin a little indelicate. Before Olive, too, but then he was a man. Uncle Herbert was thinking the things were rather dull now than Darcy gone. Chapter 12, a very short chapter. Valence hurried home through the faint blue twilight. Hurried too fast, perhaps. Too fast, perhaps. The attack she had when she thankfully reached the shelter of her own room was the worst yet. It was really very bad. She might die in one of those spells. It would be dreadful to die in such pain. Perhaps, perhaps this was death. Well, she felt pitifully alone. When she could think at all, she wondered, would it really like to have someone with her who could sympathize? Somehow, someone who really cared, just to hold her hand tight. If nothing else, someone just to say, yes, I know, it's dreadful, be brave, you'll soon be better. Not someone merely fuzzy and alarmed. Not her mother or cousin Stickles. Why does the thought of Barney Smith come into her mind? Why did she suddenly feel, in the midst of this hideous loneliness of pain, that he would be sympathetic? Sorry for anyone that was suffering. Why does he seem to her like an old, well known friend? Was it because she had been standing up to her family for him? She was so bad at first that she could not even get herself a dose of Dr. Trent's prescription. But eventually she managed it, and soon after relief came. The pain left her, and she lay on her bed, spent, exhausted in a cold perspiration. Oh, that had been horrible. She could not endure many more attacks like that. One don't mind dying if death would be instant and painless, but to be hurt so in dying. Suddenly, she found herself laughing. The dinner had been fun, and it had all been so simple. She had merely said the things she had always thought. Their faces. Ah, their faces. Uncle Benjamin. Poor! Flag-breasted Uncle Benjamin. Flag-breasted Uncle Benjamin. Flabbergasted Uncle Benjamin. And as if I'm quite sure he would make a new will that very night. Olive would get Valence's share of his fat hoard. Olive had always got Valence's share of everything. Remember the dust pile? To laugh at her plan, as she had always wanted to laugh, was all the satisfaction she could get out of life now. But she thought it was rather pitiful that it should be true. Might she not pity herself a little when nobody else did? Well, as he got up and went to her window, the moist, beautiful wind blowing across groups of young leafed wild trees touched her face with the caress of a wise, tender old friend. The Lombardis in Mrs. Treadgold's lawn, off to the left, well as he could just see them between this table and the old carriage shop. were in dark purple silhouette against a clear sky, and there was a milk white, pulsating star just over one of them, like a living pearl on a silver green lake. Far beyond the station were the shadowy, purple hooded birds around Lake Mysterious. A white, filmy mist hung over them, and just above it was a faint young crescent. Vanessa looked at it over her thin left shoulder. I wish, she said whimsically, that I may have one little dust mite before I die. Okay, fuck it, it ended, man. It ended, mate. But